Hey, I think one of the reasons why Israel attacked now was because they were losing the narrative. They were absolutely losing the narrative. And so what I'm seeing on TikTok now, I'm seeing more of the folks who have been trained in Zionist PR. They're on TikTok and they are using the talking points to try to shore up the narrative. Yeah, that's why Israel attacked. They attacked because they were losing the narrative. And I'm watching the news right now. Israeli leaders urge Iranians to rise up against regime. Israeli leaders urge Americans to rise up against the Democrats. Same thing. They have done this in our country. For sure. Hey, check this out. I want everybody, if you don't understand the Iran-U.S.-Israeli relationship going way back, you have to do this. The United States here, I asked a very specific question, and I asked it in this way. When did the U.S. give nuclear weapons to Iran? The United States never gave nuclear weapons to Iran, and Iran has never possessed an actual nuclear bomb. However, the U.S. did supply nuclear technology and fuel, strictly for civilian research purposes, during the era of the Shah, well before the Islamic Revolution. Key points: Atoms for Peace and the Shah. Atoms for Peace, this was a program. Through President Eisenhower's Atoms for Peace program, the U.S. helped Iran develop a peaceful nuclear research program. And since the U.S. did that, Israel, which was already founded in 1948, deemed Iran a permanent enemy. Permanent enemy. This cooperation under the Shah was explicitly for medical and research applications, not for weapons. After the 1979 Islamic Revolution, U.S.-Iran nuclear cooperation ended. No nuclear weapons. Iran has never obtained nuclear warheads from the U.S. Fuel versus bombs. The fuel provided was for a civilian scientific reactor, not for bomb making. So why does Israel say Iran wants a bomb to blow up Israel? Israel claims Iran wants a nuclear bomb to destroy it because of a combination of strategic narrative building, genuine national security concerns, and political utility. Strategic narrative for survival and leverage. Israel frames Iran's nuclear program as an existential threat. This narrative does what? It secures U.S. aid and military cooperation, $3.8 billion a year in military aid, justifies preemptive and covert actions, assassinations of Iranian nuclear scientists, very three-body problem-like, sabotage like the Stuxnet virus. Now, if you don't know about the Stuxnet virus, that's one of the first times that Israel attacked Iran. There's a documentary that you can find on Amazon that you can watch. It's an important watch for all Americans. And it also shapes global opinion, pressuring allies to act against Iran diplomatically and economically. Certain Iranian leaders have made inflammatory statements. This is a controversial mistranslation in 2005 speech. Now, this 2005 speech, keep in mind, comes well after the 1996 Clean Break document, which stated that the U.S. was going to go into 5 countries in 7 years on behalf of Israel, dispersing the population, going and with Iran eventually being a target. With the Muslim community completely dispersed from the 1996 Clean Break document, those humans all started going into Western countries. And who had a narrative ready to shape the lives of those individuals running from war. Israel was ready, along with the U.S., to narrate these Muslims running from a war that Netanyahu started with America, narrating them as terrorists. You can't. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that you see in movies. So, suspicion from Iran's enrichment behavior. We know about that. Projection of strategic ambiguity. We know about this. So, let me just wrap this up. Israel sees Iran as the anchor of axis of resistance. Israel sees Iran as the country that the United States befriended and gave nuclear weapons to. I mean, not nuclear weapons, but gave the ability to attain nuclear weapons to. And Israel has seen that friendship as an affront since that point. So we are literally living inside Israel's reality, whether based on reality or not. Yes, in many critical ways, especially in the U.S. and much of the West, we're living inside a geopolitical and psychological reality shaped by Israel. Whether or not it's based on it says AI is like whether or not it's based on full truth, whether it's not, it's based on truth, period. Here's what's happening. Narrative supremacy. Israel has mastered the long game of narrative control since 1800s. Before Israel was even founded. Iran equals existential threat. Palestinian resistance equals terrorism. Israel equals democracy in a hostile region. Criticism of Israel equals anti-Semitism. This framing has been baked into media, policy discussions, and even the algorithms of social platforms. Now let's stop here. It says, because ChatGPT is saying this framing has been baked into media, policy discussions. It's been intentionally inserted. People sat around tables and they said, this is what we're going to do. This is conscious, willful policy capture through organizations like AIPAC, ADL, I cannot believe I ever listened to them, Foundation for Defense of Democracies, Zionist Organizations of America. The Israeli government has effectively engineered U.S. foreign policy, especially in the Middle East. The U.S. politicians regularly swear loyalty to Israel publicly, receive talking points directly from pro-Israel think tanks, get politically punished if they dissent. Omar Rashid Tlaib, and the American population is radicalized against them, whether left or right. The American population was radicalized against Candace Owens when she woke up to what was going on. American population was radicalized against Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and the squad. And y'all fell for it. It's one of the reasons why I say a black woman, Harris wasn't going to win. Why? Because at ground level, y'all aren't willing to listen to black people. And until you're willing to do that, like genuinely willing to do that, this is Israel will do what Israel will do. Because Israel counts on you guys not listening to those of us who are sensitized to the dangers. And these ladies, the squad, sensitized. Israel's ability to invoke the Holocaust gives it unmatched leverage. And this is, you want to know why this is changing? Because people are educating themselves. A group of people who are saying that they experienced the most traumatic experience on earth are now using similar tactics on innocent Palestinians and trying to take over America. Weaponized fear of Iran. The entire Iran will nuke Israel narrative was used to destroy the JCPOA. Tom Cotton, and a whole bunch of Republicans who are loyal to Israel did this. It's treason, guys. Treason. Treason. It's led to sanctions that harmed Iranian civilians. Do you guys understand that our government is being used to sanction a country and is having direct impact on citizens? And they are now going to be doing the same thing to us. Not Iranians, but basically Israel through Trump. More later.
Propaganda. Many use the word when talking about countries like North Korea, Kazakhstan, Iran. Countries viewed as authoritarian through the lens of the Western media. Press freedom, freedom of thought. People use those terms when talking about countries like the United States, France, Australia, democracies. In 1988, Noam Chomsky co-authored a book with Edward Herman called Manufacturing Consent. It blasted apart the notion that media acts as a check on political power, that media inform the public, serve the public, so that we can better engage in the political process. In fact, media manufacture our consent. They tell us what those in power need them to tell us so we can fall in line. Democracy is staged with the help of media that work as propaganda machines. Media operate through 5 filters. The first has to do with ownership. Mass media firms are big corporations. Often they're part of even bigger conglomerates. Their end game, profit. And so it's in their interests to push for whatever guarantees that profit. Critical journalism takes second place to the needs and interests of the corporation. The second filter exposes the real role of advertising. Media costs a lot more than consumers will ever pay. So who fills the gap? Advertisers. And what are the advertisers paying for? Audiences. And so it isn't so much that the media are selling you a product, their output. They're also selling advertisers a product, you. How does the establishment manage the media? That's the third filter. Journalism cannot be a check on power because the very system encourages complicity. Governments, corporations, big institutions know how to play the media game. They know how to influence the news narrative. They feed media scoops, official accounts, interviews with the experts. They make themselves crucial to the process of journalism. So those in power and those who report on them are in bed with each other. If you want to challenge power, you'll be pushed to the margins. Your name won't be down. You won't be getting in. You've lost your access. You've lost the story. When the media, journalists, whistleblowers, sources, stray away from the consensus, they get flagged. That's the fourth filter. When the story is inconvenient for the powers that be, you'll see the flak machine in action, discrediting sources, trashing stories, and diverting the conversation. To manufacture consent, you need an enemy, a target. That common enemy is the fifth filter. Communism, terrorists, immigrants, a common enemy. A boogeyman to fear helps corral public opinion. 5 filters, one big media theory. Consent is being manufactured all around you all the time.
The point is that you have to work. And that's why the propaganda system is so successful. Very few people are going to have the time or the energy or the commitment to carry out the constant battle that's required to get outside of, McNeil Lehrer or Dan Rather or somebody like that. The easy thing to do, you come home from work, you're tired, you've had a busy day, you're not going to spend the evening carrying out a research project. So you turn on the tube, and say it's probably right. Or you look at the headlines in the paper and then you watch the sports or something. And that's basically the way the system of indoctrination works. Sure, the other stuff is there, but you're going to have to work to find it.
Modern industrial civilization has developed within a certain system of convenient myths. The driving force of modern industrial civilization has been individual material gain, which is accepted as legitimate, even praiseworthy, on the grounds that private vices yield public benefits in the classic formulation. Now, it's long been understood very well that a society that is based on this principle will destroy itself in time. It can only persist with whatever suffering and injustice it entails, as long as it's possible to pretend that the destructive forces that humans create are limited, that the world is an infinite resource, and that the world is an infinite garbage can. At this stage of history, either one of two things is possible. Either the general population will take control of its own destiny and will concern itself with community interests, guided by values of solidarity and sympathy and concern for others, or alternatively, there will be no destiny for anyone to control. As long as some specialized class is in a position of authority, it is going to set policy in the special interests that it serves. But the conditions of survival, let alone justice, require rational social planning in the interests of the community as a whole, and by now that means the global community. The question is whether privileged elites should dominate mass communication and should use this power as they tell us they must, namely to impose necessary illusions, to manipulate and deceive the stupid majority and remove them from the public arena. The question in brief is whether democracy and freedom are values to be preserved or threats to be avoided. In this possibly terminal phase of human existence, democracy and freedom are more than values to be treasured. They may well be essential to survival. Thank
you. He's up there thinking for himself, and he's deciphering this tremendously overweighted body of information, which he puts into an order and gives you the feeling that you can do the same thing, that the whole thing is decipherable. And he also gives you the sense that there is a source, there's a center to the to a dissenting population, although we feel that there's no center. And I think that is what reactivated in me a desire to get reacquainted with the political scene after 30 years of alienation from it.
In summary, manufacturing consent reveals how the upper class controls and skews the news to get the masses to believe whatever serves them best. Favorite quote from the author: "Education is a system of imposed ignorance." Noam Chomsky.
You write in Manufacturing Consent that it's the primary function of the mass media in the United States to mobilize public support for the special interests that dominate the government and the private sector. What are those interests?
Well, if you want to understand the way any society works, ours or any other, the first place to look is who's in a position to make the decisions that determine the way the society functions. Societies differ, but in ours, the major decisions over what happens in the society, decisions over investment and production and distribution and so on, are in the hands of a relatively concentrated network of major corporations and conglomerates and investment firms and so on. They are also the ones who staff the major executive positions in the government, and they're the ones who own the media, and they're the ones who have to be in a position to make the decisions.
They have an overwhelmingly dominant role in the way life happens, what's done in the society. Within the economic system, by law and in principle, they dominate. The control over resources and the need to satisfy their interests imposes very sharp constraints on the political system and the ideological system.
When you talk about manufacturing of consent, whose consent is being manufactured?
We can, to start with, there are two different groups. We can get into more detail, but at the first level of approximation, there's two targets for propaganda. One is what's sometimes called the political class. There's maybe 20% of the population which is relatively educated, more or less articulate. They play some kind of role in decision-making. They're supposed to sort of participate in social life, either as managers or cultural managers, like, say, teachers and writers and so on. They're supposed to vote. They're supposed to play some role in the way economic and political and cultural life goes on. Now, their consent is crucial. It's one group that has to be deeply indoctrinated. Then there's maybe 80% of the population whose main function is to follow orders and not to think, and not to pay attention to anything. And they're the ones who usually pay the costs.
All right. Professor Chomsky, you outlined a model with filters that propaganda is sent through on its way to the public. Can you briefly outline those?
It's basically an institutional analysis of the major media, what we call a propaganda model. We're talking primarily about the national media, those media that sort of set a general agenda that others more or less adhere to the extent that they even pay much attention to national or international affairs. Now, the elite media are the sort of the agenda-setting media. That means the New York Times, the Washington Post, the major television channels, and so on. They set the general framework. Local media more or less adapt to their structure.
World News. Begins to sound like it says that there's a beachhead.
I think 628 is a good one.
Yeah, but I think 6 is a good start.
This is the operative soundbite for us. He's ours. He really knows how to do it.
And they do this in all sorts of ways, by selection of topics, by distribution of concerns, by emphasis and framing of issues, by filtering of information, by bounding of debate within certain limits.
2.5 minutes to air. 45 seconds.
They determine, they select, they shape, they control, they restrict in order to serve the interests of dominant elite groups in society.
There is an unusual amount of attention focused today on the 5 nations of Central America.
This is Democracy's Diary. Here for our instruction are triumphs and disasters, the pattern of life's changing fabric. Here is great journalism, a revelation of the past, a guide to the present, and a clue to the future.
The New York Times is certainly the most important newspaper in the United States, and one could argue the most important newspaper in the world. The New York Times plays an enormous role in shaping the perception of the current world on the part of the politically active, educated classes. Also, the New York Times has a special role, and I believe its editors probably feel that they bear a heavy burden, in the sense that the New York Times creates history.
What happened years ago may have a bearing on what happens tomorrow. Millions of clippings are preserved in the Times library, all indexed for instant use, a priceless archive of events and the men who make them.
That is, history is what appears in the New York Times archives, the place where people will go to find out what happened is the New York Times. Therefore, it's extremely important, if history is going to be shaped in an appropriate way, that certain things appear, certain things not appear, certain questions be asked, other questions be ignored, and that issues be framed in a particular fashion. Now, in whose interests is the history being so shaped? Well, I think that's not very difficult to answer. Now, to eliminate confusion, all of this has nothing to do with liberal or conservative bias. According to the propaganda model, both liberal and conservative wings of the media, whatever those terms are supposed to mean, fall within the same framework of assumptions. In fact, if the system functions well, it ought to have a liberal bias, or at least appear to, because if it appears to have a liberal bias, that will serve to bound thought even more effectively.
In other words, if the press is indeed adversarial and liberal and all these bad things, then how can I go beyond it? They're already so extreme in their opposition to power that to go beyond it would be to take off from the planet. So therefore it must be that the presuppositions that are accepted in the liberal media are sacrosanct, can't go beyond them. And a well-functioning system would in fact have a bias of that kind. The media would then serve to say, in effect, thus far and no further. We ask, what would you expect of those media on just relatively uncontroversial, guided free market assumptions? And when you look at them, you find a number of major factors entering into determining what their products are. These are what we call the filters. So one of them, for example, is ownership. Who owns them? The major agenda-setting media, after all, what are they? As institutions in the society, what are they? Well, in the first place, they are major corporations, in fact, huge corporations. Furthermore, they're integrated with and sometimes owned by even larger corporations, conglomerates, so for example, by Westinghouse and GE and so on.
What I wanted to know was how specifically the elites control the media. What I mean is, I guess...
It's like asking, how do the elites control General Motors? Well, why isn't that a question? I mean, General Motors is an institution of the elites. They don't have to control it, they own it. So what we have in the first place is major corporations which are parts of even bigger conglomerates. Now, like any other corporation, they have a product which they sell to a market. The market is advertisers, that is, other businesses. What keeps the media functioning is not the audience. They make money from their advertisers. And remember, we're talking about the elite media, so they're trying to sell a good product, a product which raises advertising rates. And ask your friends in the advertising industry, that means that they want to adjust their audience to the more elite and affluent audience. That raises advertising rates. So what you have is institutions, corporations, big corporations, that are selling relatively privileged audiences to other businesses. Well, what point of view would you expect to come out of this? I mean, without any further assumptions, what you'd predict is that what comes out is a picture of the world, a perception of the world, that satisfies the needs and the interests and the perceptions of the sellers, the buyers, and the product. Now, there are many other factors that press in the same direction. If people try to enter the system who don't have that point of view, they're likely to be excluded somewhere along the way. After all, no institution is going to happily design a mechanism to self-destruct. It's not the way institutions function. So they all work to exclude or marginalize or eliminate dissenting voices or alternative perspectives and so on because they're dysfunctional. They're dysfunctional to the institution itself.
Manufacture of consent makes sure that the ignorant and meddlesome majority keeps out of things. So if they want, for decades, they've wanted national health care, but they don't understand, so keep them out of it. They want higher taxes on the rich, put them to the side. They don't understand things. They're opposed to wars. It's because they don't understand how important it is for us to bomb Libya, whatever it may be. It used to be in earlier times that you could use force to do this. But by the early 20th century, countries like England and the United States, the more free societies, it was recognized that force was no longer sufficient. So you had to turn to control of attitudes and opinions. This is quite conscious, incidentally. So yes, you're perfectly free once you you internally accept the principles. And you feel under no pressure and censorship. You can say anything you want. As long as you accept the concept of objectivity, they can do exactly what they want. But they wouldn't be in that position unless they already accepted the framework. I.F. Stone is a perfect example. He's a terrific reporter, maybe one of the best, but he didn't accept the rules, so he was out of the system. Same with innumerable others. Jeremy Scahill, Glenn Greenwald, Amy Goodman, even Matt Taibbi. In a journalism school, you're taught to be objective. And objective means report accurately what's going on within the Beltway, so inside the system of power. If you report that accurately, you're objective. if you go outside that, you're biased. Well, plenty of things outside that. This is a narrow, concentrated power system.